everyone. I'm here with Patrick. He's from OSPR. And would you like to introduce yourself, Patrick, and tell us a little bit about what OSPR do and your current role, please?
Certainly. My name's Patrick McMurray. I have a background in oil and gas and in the shipping industry. Actually, a very long time ago, I first trained as an instrument technician and worked in chemicals, but mostly it's been oil and gas and shipping since then. OSPR is the Offshore Safe Professionals Register. It's a membership association. Essentially, that means it's a club for employees, basically people who work themselves in the offshore industry. And we have a vision which is about promoting the health, safety and welfare of the entire offshore workforce. And we do that by supporting our members in training, in recruitment, in representing them in the industry and with employers and in collaboration. The organization is 5 years old. It was created in Aberdeen. It was mostly volunteer run up until about 6 months ago when I became the first full-time employee, and there are now 3 of us. I'm the membership manager, which means we're all about supporting the membership, you know?
That's brilliant, thank you, and congratulations for being the first OSPR employee.
Yes, employee number 1, that's me.
What interests you most about your job, and what have been your highlights so far?
Okay, this is a very people-focused job. My job is very much about responding to members, dealing with any problems or challenges they're facing, talking to training providers about supporting our members with courses, developing the website and the other tools that we use to respond to members. It's kind of it's one of those very people-focused jobs. It's all about people all the time, which has made it a bit of a challenge doing it in lockdown, because I have spent so much time on Zoom and Teams in the past 6 months. You know, I sometimes feel like my whole day is made up of meetings, but you know, we carry on. We've had quite a few interesting achievements. The one that springs to mind is that we partnered with the Global Wind Organization, GWO, training for the renewables industry offshore, to help. Essentially, GWO is an employer organization, and they wanted to engage more with employees, and we were one of the organizations that it chose to help them engage more with the workforce.
That's brilliant, thank you. And why is safety so important in the energy industry?
That's an interesting question. I think safety is important in every industry, but there are some industries which by their nature are more dangerous. I mean, every industry has its own points of danger. In fact, even working from home is quite dangerous, you know, get electrocuted, fall down the steps, all those sorts of things. Certain industries, the railways, for example, or shipping or nuclear industry, are particularly dangerous because they involve chemicals, radiation, high voltages, moving machinery, lots of dangerous things like that. And then offshore is one step beyond that, because you take all the risks that you might get with a dangerous onshore industry and you put them out at sea, you know, in a place surrounded by storms. You might have to get to by helicopter or by boat. So essentially, what makes safety so is that the industry is intrinsically so dangerous. So what safety professionals try and do is to reduce that danger. The ambition is that everybody always goes home and in one piece.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Can you tell us what types of jobs involving safety there are within the industry?
I can do a little bit better than that. I can show you. One of the things that OSPR does is in order to help our members progress within the industry and show off their skills, we've got a series of membership levels, starting at level 1. People like myself who safety background, right up to level 5, senior people within the industry. We've been doing a bit of work on developing these levels, and I want to show you what the latest version looks like. Give me just 1 second.
That's brilliant, thank you.
Now, hopefully you can see a PowerPoint slide.
Yes, I can, Patrick.
Now, the reason I'm sharing this, because this page, for example, talks in quite a lot of detail about the sorts of positions you might find within the industry. So, for example, you've got a client representative who's basically the person working to represent the client offshore. You've got offshore tradespeople. They might be electricians or mechanical engineers, for example. You've got people, and of course, not everybody who works in the offshore industry actually gets in a helicopter and goes to work. There are, for example, substations where power comes on shore. There are people who work in offices. So there are those sorts of roles as well. Then as you move up the industry in more senior roles at level 3, for example, you've got people like health and safety advisors and more experienced people. And then you start getting into management territory, officers and offshore managers. And then at the very top, you've got people who might be health and safety managers, senior consultants, senior offshore managers. Those are basically the people putting together the safety systems and that everybody else is working within. And the next thing that on the next slide talks about the sorts of industry qualifications that they might have. Their diplomas, the sort of training and qualifications they might have. This is definitely an industry where learning never stops. Where what you do, it's all about lifelong learning. It's all about keeping your skills up to date. It's all about learning new skills. There's a big thing going on at the moment about people who transitioning from the oil and gas industry to the offshore renewables industry and retraining for that. So this is not an industry for people who don't want to learn or train.
That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing that presentation with us. And that's certainly interesting to see how your membership levels work. What skills might you need to undertake these roles?
I think this is a lot about. So I think what makes the safety role can make safety roles quite challenging is that you need a lot of technical skills. You need to be able to deal with documentation. You need to be able to deal with reports. You need to write procedures and things. But the core of safety is about people, about encouraging people to be safe. It's not enough to train people. You've got, if you've got people you want to train in a particular procedure, you've got to make sure that they understand and absorb the procedure. So a lot of it is about leadership and education skills and people skills. So what makes it a challenging industry is you kind of need to bring you need to bring your whole self to the table. You need to bring not just your understanding of reports and procedures and things, but you also need to bring in, your emotional intelligence and your ability to work with people and your enthusiasm to do the job right. And you've got to get it to the stage that where some guy is on a wind turbine or an oil rig, and it's the middle of the night and there's a storm and there's suddenly a fire or some other emergency, that he knows what to do, because 6 months before, when you created the training course, you thought about what that person would actually experience in that time and how to deal with it. Quite a challenging role, but a very interesting one, I think.
That's fantastic, thank you. What advice would you give to someone looking at starting their career within the industry?
Like any industry, the hardest part can be entering. Coming with the right qualification, the right background, taking on internships, doing such work during the summer as you can, is important. Obviously, I'd like to say that I think joining OSPR would be a very good career move. We've just introduced a student membership, which will be open to students and recent graduates. there's a lot about understanding the whole shape of the industry. For example, there aren't just the wind farms and the oil rigs themselves. There are the companies that build the wind turbines and the oil rigs. There are the companies that build the bits of equipment that go on them. I spent 25 years working in the oil and gas industry offshore without ever actually going offshore myself. I mostly worked for engineering companies that were supplying process heating and level gauges and instrumentation and all sorts of other things. And it was just as important in those companies to understand why it was important that this equipment was built to spec and to tolerance. And then beyond that, there's all sorts of places within the industry which are much more people orientated. There's a whole selection of membership associations and trade unions and other organizations that work with the industry, private and public, some of them government owned, some of them trade associations, recruitment companies. So there's a whole range of routes into the industry, and to some extent where you're likely to go depend on your own skill set. If your own skill set is heavily towards people, then you might end up at the recruitment end or training end of the industry. If on the other hand you were much more interested in dealing with the paperwork, the administration, the course design, then you might end up working for one of the companies writing the specification, or somebody like OG UK. So it's a very varied industry with lots of different entry points.
Yeah, that sounds really, really good. Thank you. What information / facts might surprise people about the industry?
Interesting about energy, it's kind of an invisible industry, but it's huge. I mean, it's like shipping. They're both huge industries. We live in an island. Everything we get gets shipped to us. And also, to some extent, because we live in an island, we more or less make all our own energy. I say more or less because of the energy interconnectors to France and what have you. But it's a huge industry, and it always has been since the Industrial Revolution. Coal and gas, and then the oil and gas industry, and now renewables. This is an important industry. Yeah.
Yes.
But a very invisible one.
I tend to agree there.
Yeah.
What would you recommend? Would you recommend the energy industry as a career option?
Absolutely. One thing I'm going to point out is that, for example, if you look at this situation during the pandemic, okay, lots of people have been furloughed. Lots of people have, some huge number got made redundant last month. Lots of people are finding it hard to get jobs. Not in this industry. Nothing stopped. I have a couple of colleagues working on one of the big wind farms in Scotland. They didn't have one day when they weren't working. Yeah, it's important. It's so important to keep this industry taking over. There are other industries. You may have noticed that the railways never actually stopped. Food supply never actually stopped. But if you want an industry where you're going to play a key role in how this country works and how we keep things going, this is it. I will also say there's a huge push inside the industry to green itself. This stuff about renewables it's actually pretty much industry driven. Yeah, it's people within the industry who want to figure out greener and better ways of doing things with not just wind, but floating wind and hydrogen, and there's a lot of push from within the industry to do this as well. I mean, maybe the start came from the outside, with investors and protesters and whatever. Now this is an industry that wants to be green and wants to make a better, a bigger contribution to the world. So yes, I would strongly recommend this as a career option, both because it'll be good for you as a person, it's a good industry to work in, and it'll help you do your bit to make the world a better place.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for your time today, Patrick.
You're welcome.
Very much appreciated, and take care.